Welcome. Thank you to those who are with us today. We are resuming our Liberty briefing after a month hiatus for the summertime, but it's good to be back and just appreciate the faithful prayers of the Liberty Prayer Network. Kathy has done an incredible job over the years, Maureen Bravo as well, and it's resulted in tremendous victories. I'm absolutely convinced that many of the victories, most of the victories that have occurred, including game changers for religious freedom, were because of the faithful prayers of those who are part of this Liberty Prayer Network. So we appreciate y'all for being a part of it. My name is Summer. I am the VP of Strategic Affairs for Liberty Counsel Action. And we have a great call today. We have a lot of new developments over the past month, and I'll just give a few highlights of things that have occurred since we met last. We know that the Trump administration has withdrawn and defunded several global entities, which is an answer to prayer, including from the World Health Organization as well as from other UN global bodies. The Trump administration rejected the international health regulations, which I can't go into all of the details now as to why that's so incredibly exciting, but it is a miracle, just an absolute miracle from where we were even just a year ago. So thanking God for that answered prayer. Also, President Trump is helping to dismantle the Johnson Amendment in National Religious Broadcasters v. Long. In that settlement, Trump and a Trump-appointed IRS commissioner affirmed in court that communications from a house of worship to its congregation in connection with religious services through its usual channels of communication on matters of faith do not run afoul of the Johnson Amendment as properly interpreted. That single line represented the collapse of a weapon used for decades to chill religious expression. So we're, again, excited for the breakthroughs. Just a couple of other things since we've met last. Congress has defunded Planned Parenthood for the first time ever. The world's largest Planned Parenthood clinic has closed due to lack of funding. We know there's still an ongoing prayer point on that, but we have seen tremendous breakthrough on that front. Also, photographer Emily Carpenter won a crucial free speech victory against New York. The Justice Department has taken down dark web child abuse sites. And honestly, the list goes on. These are just some of the highlights since we met last, and can't thank the Lord enough for these answered prayers, and again for the prayers of all of you who've stayed at the course and have continued to stand in the gap for our nation and for Liberty Counsel Ministries. Just a couple of house briefing things. We are recording the call, and so as the presenters share, also there will be time to ask questions. If you would like to share this link with people to get more people to join us today, you're welcome to do that now. Also, if you want more information about the topics that we're discussing, you're welcome to go to libertycounselLC.org or lcaction.org for more information. These are extremely complex issues, and everything that you need to know about everything that we're discussing can be found on those websites. Finally, join us Thursdays at noon. Besides the first Thursday of the month, we have just a conference call of prayer. So members of the Liberty Prayer Network pray every Thursday at noon for our team, for these issues, and we welcome you to join us. If you'd like more information, email me at singram@lcaction.org. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn to our presenters. We have first up today Mariah Gondero. She's litigation counsel for Liberty Counsel, and she's going to share with us. You know what, Mariah, when you before you share, if you wouldn't mind opening us in prayer, that would be great. But she's going to share with us some victories today, as well as the latest on the Kim Davis case, which we know is
Yes.
we believe will overturn the Obergefell ruling and help restore marriage, God's definition of marriage in our nation, and again, that battle back to the state. So I'll let her go into more of that. But Mariah, if you would please go ahead and open us up in prayer and then share those important legal updates. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, God, just so much for this opportunity to gather with like-minded individuals and unity in your spirit to discuss all the amazing things you're doing in and through us at Liberty Counsel. Thank you for the privilege and the honor of getting to serve you and your people. What a privilege it is to be able to serve you in these end times. And I pray that our focus will always be on you and everything we do will always be to glorify you. And I pray that this meeting will be edifying to you and encouraging. And I pray that you just use this meeting to empower us, give us wisdom, divine revelation through the speakers. And also, I just thank you so much for all the supporters who are on here, who are loyal followers. I pray just blessing over all of them, their finances, their resources, their family, and their lives for all that they do to support Liberty Counsel behind the scenes. We couldn't do what we do without their faithful following and support. And so I just pray a blessing over them. I bless this meeting. I thank you so much for Summer for organizing it and everyone on this call. In Jesus' name, amen. Yes. Okay. So I will give you an update. Oh my gosh, I don't even know where to begin. As I was preparing for this call, I was realizing we've done so much this past month since we've last had this meeting. So I want to go and talk about the high level cases, the big cases that have been ongoing for a while. As many of you guys know, Kim Davis is back in the news. You've probably seen her in the news over this past month. Every news channel, I think, has been reporting on her case. We have petitioned the Supreme Court to hear her matter. She originally, was a county clerk who refused to issue same-sex marriage licenses because of her religious conviction. She sought a religious accommodation, but a district judge, instead of giving her an accommodation, threw her into jail, and that really just catapulted her into the mainstream media. And people got, talked about her case, and Liberty Counsel was brave enough to represent her. The Kentucky legislature actually codified into law protecting state officials like Kim Davis to have a religious accommodation. But the two same-sex or the same-sex marriage couple really just issued a campaign against her, filed a lawsuit against her for emotional distress, seeking all this money, these damages. They used favorable media to get on their side, to really just harass her, defame her in the public. A judge ended up issuing a judgment against her, hundreds of thousands of dollars she wants Kim Davis to pay. We've petitioned the Supreme Court to overturn that decision. And also, we want to use this decision to overturn Obergefell, the Supreme Court decision that ratified same-sex marriage and is the case that the plaintiffs are relying on. And so this case is so, so important. The Supreme Court is going to conference the matter sometime in October. So we really just need so many people to pray. Prayer is so powerful. We need prayer in favor as the Supreme Court reviews our briefing, and also just prayer and protection over Kim Davis. Some of the media reports on her, the videos, Saturday Night Live late hosts that are talking about her are just so mean and malicious, mocking her. And so just praying that God surround her with people who can uplift her and encourage her and her family as well, because I'm sure they're being drug in the mud. And so just pray for vindication for her. We recently filed a lawsuit against the Los Angeles mayor, Karen Bass, for denying our clients a license or a permit to protest and gather in the streets during June, the May Day USA event. The May Day event was a grassroots effort that started in Peru, and it was inspired by parents who wanted to protect their children from radical gender ideology and abortion. And the movement was so strong. God was so present in that movement that the government leadership in Peru actually ended up classifying gender confusion as a mental illness. And so we want to make sure that our clients are able to express their beliefs and gather in the streets to promote this message. And so we filed a lawsuit against LA Mayor Karen Bass for denying our clients a permit while at the same time allowing the pride parades to proceed. We have a lot of cases where we are representing employees who are getting fired all across the country or retaliated against for not going along with different LGBTQ ideology. One case we recently filed, I think just a couple weeks ago, was on behalf of an ethics professor and a Christian apologist. He worked for the University of Arizona and he has amazing reviews. His students at the University of Arizona loved him, but he recently spoke out at a local school district board meeting for his child who doesn't even attend or is not affiliated with the University of Arizona. He goes to a high school and he spoke out during a board meeting on some of the radical LGBTQ indoctrination going on at his child's school. Specifically, some teachers asking the children to reveal their sexual preferences, which is absolutely abhorrent. Teachers, school administrators should not be asking these types of questions to children without parents. And so he objected to that. Um, and the University of Arizona, who is not even affiliated with his child's high school, got wind of his presentation and his beliefs and ended up firing him, classifying his speech as hate speech because he dared to go up against the LGBTQ community. We're also representing a couple realtors. We're seeing the LGBTQ indoctrination affect even realtors, for one being in Montana and then another in Virginia. Both are pastors. And the Realtors Association has retaliated against them, stripped them of their license because certain individuals in the community didn't like their religious beliefs on the LGBTQ community. And so they filed ethics complaints against them. The boards in both Virginia and Montana retaliated against our clients. And so have now been without an income because they're unable to use their license. We're also representing, or we're going to represent, a counselor in Oregon, a social worker who was retaliated against. A very liberal county in Oregon has threatened to fire our client because he does not want to hide important information from parents regarding their child's perceived gender ideology. Again, we're seeing a lot of those cases. Um, Also, recently, last week or a couple weeks ago, we had a victory on behalf of our client, the Child Evangelism Fellowship. As many of you guys know, we've been representing the Good News Club all across the country, and we have never lost a case. And recently in Oakland, California, which is a very, very liberal county, very liberal district, a district judge ruled that the Oakland School District has to allow the Good News Club to meet because we were able to show to the judge that the Good News Club was being discriminated against. They were not allowed to meet after school hours, even though the school district allows a lot of liberal organizations, LGBTQ organizations to meet. So that is a huge victory on behalf of parents in California. and religious organizations. We plan on filing a similar lawsuit in Santa Barbara, as well as Illinois and potentially North Carolina. So we're going to be all over the country representing the Good News Club, which is so important. Um, Briefly, I'm going to talk about a couple cases at the Supreme Court. Um, as many of you guys know, the Supreme Court in Mahmoud versus Taylor recently held that parents can opt their children out of radical gender theory lessons, which is a huge win for parents in religious freedom nationwide. So we are actually working on preparing an opt-out letter that parents who come to us can send to their district if they believe that their school or their teachers are forcing inappropriate LGBTQ themed lessons or books on their children. We want to make sure that these parents have resources so they can come to us and we will help them along this process. Another really big, important case that the Supreme Court is going to be deciding soon is on behalf of a licensed counselor in Colorado, Kaylee Childs, who is a Christian counselor, and she is challenging Colorado's ban on essentially Christian licensed counselors. It prevents licensed counselors from counseling individuals if it deviates from their stance on LGBTQ issues or it doesn't affirm a child's perceived gender ideology, which we all know is a mental illness. This is a very monumental case, and it's also a case that we have been heavily involved in. The Supreme Court's going to be relying on a lot of the decisions that we've helped across this country. Matt Staver, Liberty Counsel, has been involved in this matter for years, working on challenging ordinances, state laws across the country, restricting Christian licensed counselors. So this is a really important case. There's also a lot of things that Liberty Counsel does behind the scenes that not a lot of people are aware of because we're so involved in so much. We're such an effective and lean organization. In addition to all of these lawsuits, I think we have like over 30 matters. I would be here all day if we wanted to talk about everything, but we also do a lot legislatively. Our attorneys, Richard Mast, who's been a part of Liberty Counsel for a long time, we've been helping legislators in regards to the Ten Commandments movement that we're seeing across the country. I know, Summer, you've been involved in this as well, advising legislators, talking with legislators about how to draft resolutions that allow counties or school districts to put up Ten Commandments monuments, which is also something that Liberty Counsel has been involved in for decades. Matt Staver, we've argued cases in Kentucky in different circuit courts and won. And so this is another really important issue that we're involved in. And I think I covered mostly everything. So if anyone has any questions, you can ask them now.
Is there a deadline or some sort of magic point in time where we will find that the Kim Davis case has been accepted?
I would say sometime so it's conferenced in October. I would say sometime later this year we should know, or maybe early next year. Um, so yes,
Okay.
yes, lots of prayers for that. And again, just protection over her family and herself as well.
Is there an email that we could send her a note of just blessing and let her know we're praying for her?
I think we could, if anyone has words of encouragement or prayer, they could just send it to the general um, info@lc.org or legal@lc.org
Okay.
email, um, and an attorney can relay that message to her.
Okay.
She gets a lot of, inquiries, and so we try to make sure that we're at the point of contact as much as possible.
Yeah, thanks.
Mhm.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, Mariah. Excellent job. Appreciate you being on today. Now
Thank
we have
you.
Jonathan Alexander up. He is the VP of Governmental Affairs for Liberty Counsel and Liberty Counsel Action, and he is joining us today with he has a new family member. Jonathan, do you want to give us a little bit of give those who are on the call a little bit of information about your new development there, exciting new development?
Sure, happy to do it. Thanks, Summer, and thanks, Mariah, for that update, and Kathy for those questions. Yeah, very exciting time in our household. We welcomed our second daughter last Tuesday. It was a home birth that total labor was 2 hours and 10 minutes, which is an incredible blessing. My wife,
Wow.
yeah, was very grateful. She counted God's mercy as not having a protracted labor. Last time around, it was an all-day affair that allowed us to go shopping and go to a local farm while she was in labor. This time, we just had enough time to fill up the tub with warm water and have the midwives drop in before she was able to give birth. One funny line I'll say about that is, obviously so I've heard, labor is painful, and so she's in a lot of pain and manifestly so. And says, "I think I can push." And the midwives are sort of in the other room getting stuff ready, and then she goes completely silent, and she's like, "The baby's out." So she's in the tub, and so the midwives run over, and we basically go fishing for our second daughter, who is healthy, at 8 pounds 3 ounces, 21 inches. So kind of a stretchy baby there. God has blessed us with some pretty days where we've been able to take walks, take a deep breath, and sleep is still a sort of a bargain. It, Probably not getting continuous 6 hours of sleep, but God has blessed us with a cheerful spirit. I'm able to say that we have hard afternoons, hard evenings, but never difficult days. The On the whole, God has really blessed us with a good birth and a good start to our young girl's life. So thanks, Summer, for letting me share that. It is in the context of, just how God, sort of uses our story and our life story to enable us to do this work. Mariah was able to talk about Matt and how he's, been at sort of the counseling band work for decades, and Richard, who's on the team, who's able to do so much, including all this legislative work on Ten Commandments. You think of how important the Ten Commandments are to us personally in our personal lives. God's direct instruction to us that we fail at, but that He redeems in every way possible every time we fall short. And so we are so encouraged to be in the fight, the legislative fight, to bring those Ten Commandments back to prominence. The Supreme Court case that allows individuals that are struggling with same-sex attraction, either because of abuse or because of past unresolved harm or failure to identify with one parent or another, brings about all sorts of feelings of confusion that may lead an individual down a same-sex lifestyle. Being able to sit with a counselor and talk through those feelings, and many times see them completely dissipate when they're able to bring into congruity where their faith is or where they want to be in terms of their sexuality, versus the deep hurt and sometimes abuse that they have to wrestle with, that has brought them to an LGBT lifestyle. So, we talk pretty high level about all the involvement, but it's incredible how often God works through our personal stories to make the work that we're doing at Liberty Counsel so much more effective. To that point, Chief on the Hill this week. So the primary issue that we're dealing with on the Hill is the National Defense Authorization Act. It deals with the funding for the military in the next year. Upwards of 924 billion with a B dollars are appropriated for fighter jets, for defense facilities, for ammunition, for support, actual kinetic support for our friends and allies across the world, for uh, defense personnel. And in that space of defense personnel, we have the issue or the language that wants to provide a year-over-year appropriation or a year-over-year allocation of funds for in vitro fertilization, which is a touchy subject. Of course, family formation and family building is at the heart of everything we do at Liberty Counsel. But central to God's heart as well is the preservation of life and making sure that when life is conceived and enters into this world, that it's protected legally and it's protected from a right moral standing. And it's in that specific area that my wife and I's personal story, as well as the considerations for the NDAA, sort of meet in the middle. We struggled, and many of you know this. I think Bonnie was probably the first person from the Liberty Prayer Network that we share this with that was able to pray with my wife. I think she was the very first person we've ever shared this with. But we struggled for over 6 years not being able to conceive, going after the doctors and clinics, trying to figure out what was wrong, what could work, what was right. And the reflexive knee-jerk reaction from the mainstream sort of fertility clinics was that, oh, you just need IVF. You need to join into this practice that freezes certain amount of what you're producing, of what your wife is producing. It's combined sort of in a medical facility. It's put on ice. These children are created there in the lab, implanted upwards of 8 at a time, and hopefully 1 or 2 of these babies will stick, and you'll be able to give birth. The rest of these, 8, 10, 15 embryos that it costs over $35,000 each time to go through this procedure, well, we'll just keep those on ice for an indefinite amount of time. And it's really in that creation, that sort of false creation of life, or that manufactured creation of life, that we see some of the biggest areas that occur in a mass expansion of the IVF and the NDAA. There are upwards of 9 billion embryos, 9 million with an M embryos just sitting on ice. Tens of thousands of them get destroyed if there is a freezer that goes out. Recently, there have been 2 embryos that have been implanted in a woman that were over 30 years old. The mother carrying it was about 34 years old, so she was just 4 years older than the child that she was able to carry. And of course, as we're discussing this, you can easily, in a sort of a life-giving, life-promoting sense, see both sides of the argument of families wanting to create life, that it is part of the creation mandate to be able to be fruitful and multiply. So that inherent natural desire for parenting is not at all what we're opposed to. We certainly promote that, but it's the callous nature in which that industry has manufactured, has turned into a commodity, and has mass produced with little to no ethical consideration, this practice of IVF and other artificial reproductive technologies. It's in that area that we really want to speak to. And we do so, once again, from a personal perspective, but also from a biblical perspective, understanding that every life that is conceived has a unique imprint, bears God's image. And as much as it is up to us in a society or in a culture to protect them legally, we have to make sure that we're doing so. So we, on the whole, will oppose that expansion to the NDAA, this expansion of the IVF language in the National Defense Authorization Act. They're going to start voting today, so it is worth just reading some of the literature that we have on our website that talks about the nuances of this issue, the frequently asked questions, the tough debate, work through some of the materials that we have in order to build a worldview on it, and then pray towards this afternoon as there are good amendments, over 700 amendments that have been filed, but good amendments that can provide a more ethical, restorative, whole health approach to the infertility crisis that our country faces and that members of the military face, and steer us closer to a right outcome, an outcome where we're honoring the true and natural desires of human beings to create and to procreate, but also honoring God in his preservation of life and making sure that if our taxpayer dollars, when our taxpayer dollars are being used towards this practice, that we can be confident that it is a pro-life practice and a practice that champions God's specific attention that he has to each created life. So that's really chief on the docket. We've spent the entire month of August, along with our coalition partners, really getting members of the Senate and the House up to speed on our perspective, and helping folks work through this issue, and then giving them the courage, the opportunity to be able to vote in an easier way, addressing the infertility crisis without having any negotiations on the sanctity of life issue. Two things that Mariah mentioned that I thought are very important on the legislative front. So, we do a lot of state work. That's so important. The Mahmoud decision was such a great victory for parents. I currently live in Maryland, where Montgomery County is 2 counties away. It's the county that brought this case forward. I was able to sit down with Jeff and Slitvana Roman, 2 parents that were named plaintiffs in this case. Their job or their lifestyle is they refurbish hotels. So they take old hotels or motels. They sort of have a contracting business. It's all done in-house with their family and contracting, and they refurbish hotels. That's what their livelihood is. It's able to provide for not just the grandparents of the children, but also the uncles and aunts are all part of the business. It's a big family business, and that's where their concern and priorities were, up until Montgomery County decided to bring forward this highly sexually charged material to their students, and do so in a manner where they're asking third graders to go to pride parades and discover certain items based on the alphabet. So for D, they would have to find a drag queen. For L, they had to find lingerie or lace or leather at a pride parade. And these are things that are so beyond the pale of what you and I, as as Bible believers, as those that want to remain pure and true to how God has designed human sexuality. If we were to read some of these things, not only we would blush, but we'd have a visceral reaction to it. And so did these parents. These are Catholic parents. They're like, we don't want our kids exposed to this nonsense. And so what did Montgomery County do? Well, they doubled down and said, well, first they said you can't have an opt-out. Tens of thousands of parents like Jeff and Slitvana took that opt-out. Montgomery County said, well, we're going to remove that opt-out. Parents fought back against it. And so they started holding their children back from when those lessons are being taught. And so what the county did, they doubled down again and spread this material, not just in the human sexuality portion of the curriculum, but all through the maths and the sciences and the English and the arts, so that no parent could really find where that information was in order to even keep their kids home from this content that they were pumping into these 3-year-old to 5-year-old minds in this county. Parents were able to be creative and still keep their kids away from this content. And so what the school did was even more egregious. They would tell teachers in their rubric that if a child comes to you and say that their parents disagrees with this content, tell that child that their parents are being unkind, that your parents are being unfair, that your parents are being bullies for not embracing this highly charged LGBT sexualized content. That was in the teacher's rubric. It's in the record of them instructing teachers to tell students that their parents are wrong if their parents kept them away from this content. Thankfully, the Supreme Court, in a very strong fashion, not only laid out that Montgomery County was wrong in not allowing an opt-out, sort of reestablishing an opt-out for all 50 states, but they went even further and said that there cannot be a one-size-fits-all sort of method of education in this country. It's not just the public schools. It's not just the regime schools that are able to teach students. There needs to be private schools. There needs to be homeschools. And specifically mentioning homeschools was so important Maryland just got through a fight where the homeschool regulations were being revised, where there were threats of requiring parents to have degree certifications, or even as far as home inspections for the parents that just want to be able to teach their kids and train them up according to not just their faith, but train them up in their academics as well. So the Mahmoud decision, we're just starting to see the reverberations of how great that case is. Of course, you know of California that's going in the opposite direction, that is sort of cementing this ability for a emancipated minor or a minor that's running away from home or a minor that's just showing up in the state to be able to be removed from that minor, from their parents' authority, placed in the same-sex home, or even just an adult that feels like this kid is born in the wrong body, being able to sign a paper in front of a judge, take hold of that minor outside of their parents' consent and raise them as their own. So the fight is still there when it comes to the LGBT agenda. Despite them having setbacks, they're ingenious at doing evil. Really, they're trying to find more and more ways to combat what you and I know are God's principles when it comes to human sexuality. One last thing on the Mahmoud decision here in Maryland as well. Maryland only has a 90-day session from January to April, but in September, they may have an emergency docket come up where they're trying to have certain books be effectively always protected. And it's going to be these LGBT books. It's going to be books that talk about highly sexualized content, making them like a sort of a protected class where you can't touch those books in the library or in the classroom. You won't be able to ever remove them from distribution amongst students. And you ask these legislatures, like, you know, what's the point of really pushing this on young kids' minds? And this is obviously a prayer point. Those that are in the LGBT agenda are saying, well, you know, these kids, in order to become good citizens, have to know that these sort of lifestyles are out there so that they can make a decision to sort of follow this lifestyle. And that's so beyond the pale of what an educator should be doing. It's so beyond the pale of what a legislature should be putting into law, just saying, hey, because there are these alternative lifestyles, it's up to us to make sure that your child is introduced to that. That's not what education is for. That's not what the government is for. And especially in the context that if a parent says, no, I want to be the first one to teach my children this, or I don't want my children to be exposed to this at all. There's no moral argument. There's no legal justification. There's no legislative vehicle by which a government has an authority to usurp those parents' rights and put that content in front of kids. So we're going to see, unfortunately, in a lot of these blue states, in reaction to the Mahmoud decision, more fights where it comes to the content that's being taught to children and our ability to be able to preserve and protect the innocence of these kids, especially when they're in these education settings. One of the delegates was challenged by a friendly legislature in questioning, asking him, hey, do you even have kids? And he's a same-sex married man that has adopted. And he was like, yeah, I do have kids. And, I was able to, sort of think of an answer like, I don't care if this member has one kid or even if he has 100 kids. It is not up to government to dictate to children these highly charged sexual information, and certainly not up to government if parents are saying, I don't want my child exposed to this. It's not up to government or to teachers to usurp that. So the battle is real. Thankfully, we are in the fight. We're continuing to uphold God's principles when it comes to human sexuality, but we're buttressed and buffered, of course, by every prayer and the specific prayer that God continue to defend the innocence of our kids, to rescue those that are being led away to the slaughter in terms of the pro-life fight, but also deliver those that are being led to the point of death, deliver them, these young kids from the assaults on their minds and their innocence that come oftentimes through the school system. I know Mariah mentioned the Child Evangelism Fellowship. That's a light in the darkness. It's a way to push through and show that there is an alternative to, the filth that's being spread. There's the gospel of Jesus Christ that has first redeemed our hearts, and how incredible it is that it has redeemed our souls first, and the courage that it takes to be able to want to share that with the children at schools, but also share that through all the ministries that Liberty Counsel does. It's incredible to be a part of it, and there's as Mariah also said, there's so much more we can talk about. But just be encouraged. This is a season that God has birthed us all for, and one in which that He's certainly shown His blessings because of your prayers.
Thank you, Jonathan. That is such an incredibly important issue, and I know we'll be keeping that in prayer on Thursdays. I had a couple questions regarding one, the NDAA. I heard that there's potentially going to be an AI moratorium in that NDAA. Have you heard anything along those lines?
Yeah. So this is in funding, and basically writing the rules for a potential regulations around funding. If you're hearing some more details, I'm happy to hear it at a meeting at 2:30 where I'll get more content as to what's actually being debated. I think on the whole, it's an issue where it has bipartisan slow walking, so not really a comprehensive understanding of what AI regulations should look like, what the use of AI technology in the military space is ultimately going to look like. We've had to fast track this discussion because some of the most recent kinetic engagements have been based on AI. Ukraine, who we funded to hundreds of billions of dollars, has fought a huge portion of their military exchanges with Russia based on AI technology. It's been very useful for the Israel fighting against Iran. Iran has used it through the Houthis and some of these other terror cells to attack Israel and some of our other allies. So the question is out there legally: what do we do in terms of regulating the use of AI for our military practice? And there's going to be a number assigned to it. So one way to see how much stake we'll have in the game is how much money we're allocating towards the research, towards the development, and what parameters we can get in this bill to sort of speak to and regulate the space of AI. But it's not something we're going to be able to shy away from in terms of a conversation. And when it is on the highest level in terms of actual kinetic attacks and missiles and ammunition attached to AI, it brings that consideration to the forefront, makes it a more dire situation that we have to speak to pretty soon. So, yeah, happy to dig in a little deeper, probably next time when I get more information about it. But it's in the bill, and there is obviously a right or a wrong to it, just something that we have to pay attention to.
Sure. I know we were rejoicing that it was removed from the reconciliation bill, and then to hear it was potentially going to be tucked into this bill was disheartening. So thank you for keeping us up to date on that. One other quick question regarding the Genius Act, which we know is related to the stable coins, and it's the government tapping into basically digital currency, pegging a digital currency to the US dollar. It's different than a CBDC because it's not government controlled, but government regulated. And we thought, there's mixed reviews on this act, but my understanding is that there is some ongoing negotiations. Is there anything that we need to be aware of as it relates to the Genius Act and ongoing negotiations that we should be keeping in prayer?
Yeah, so just sort of big picture, and you characterize it well, the difference between a government centralized banking system, such as China uses, where they're able to monitor every exchange that you have. 50% of every transaction has money assigned to it, whether it's a service or a product, a commodity that you're consuming. The other side, 50% of it has to do with monetary funding. And civilizations really do rise and fall on how we give a credit worthiness to certain financial instruments. In this modern space, modern technology, where there are cryptocurrencies, it's been sort of the trend for 7 years, where there are a lot of currencies that are able to be sort of introduced and purported as being exchange vehicles without any backing. And so the question is, does the United States, sort of like it does in the Fed, sort of how it did in the gold standard, does it come into the fight and authorize or require certain standards, certain regulations for what we as a society will consider an exchange or a modicum, a monetary exchange? And so that's where the ultimate question is: how much should government get involved in regulating what you and I deem as sufficient currency for exchanging? It's probably one of the oldest defining points of a civilization, how commerce is conducted in this modern era. We have to deal with technology and deal with what place the federal government has in regulating that. There are right ways to do it. There are wrong ways to do it. The wrong way is what China and other nations have done in terms of the central banking. A better way to do it is not by the US producing its own coin, but at least saying, hey, for the purposes of limiting fraud, limiting monopoly, that there is going to be a certain tightening that we can put on what currencies are considered proper for monetary exchange. The negotiations as they stand now. So the Genius Act was on the floor in June and July, and has consistently walked back just because it's something like 1,000, almost 2,000 page bill, where they really just have to get through the details. You don't want to throw it all in at once and pass something where folks don't really understand what's going on. There's a provision that deals with our area of work, the Fourth Amendment in the Constitution, for how much information can be given from banks to the government for sort of personal records or personal credit or debit transaction, how much of that can be given in a law enforcement situation without there being a warrant. There's also portions of it that talk about debanking, areas in which conservative groups have been removed altogether from certain banks that just basically disagree with what message we're putting forward. So there are some pretty strong ethical considerations within that bill. The fact that it's slow walked is good because once the U.S. government gets into this area, we can do so under a friendly administration and a friendly Congress. But once that framework is there and it's given to potentially a Democrat-led Congress or a Democrat president, they can do all sorts of things to regulate what our transactions are, pushing us closer to China. So it's one of those bills that we really have to once again pay close attention to. There is a right and a wrong answer, but if we ultimately start with the perspective, two things that God owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. We're responsible for stewardship of this world, that we have to do right by the money and the stewardship that he's given us over our money, that there's so many principles in scripture that talk about money. If we're starting from that perspective, but also starting from the point that overregulation of currency is how many, many civilizations before us, even in recent history, have fallen. When we walk into that discussion with that philosophy and worldview, I think we'll come to a closer answer. But yeah, great observation on the Genius Act. It is a big deal that, like I said, 50% of what we do stems on how much we have, whether you're asking for a product or asking for a service or buying a product. The other exchange, about 50% of it is money and the monetary worth. So big deal. Good question.
Thank you. Yes, we'll keep that in prayer because we don't want a CBDC. So, and we know this is setting that framework in place. So thank you for that. Thank you for the updates. And again, congratulations on your new addition, Jonathan. We appreciate you being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And Abigail, you are up next. Abigail's our public policy analyst. She is working diligently on many projects. And I just want to give a quick plug on the Abortion in Our Water website. There's a new website. So those that have not seen it or have not shared it, please take a look. It's done very, very well. Abigail and John Stemberger, the president of Liberty Counsel Action, has been spearheading an effort to see the end of chemical abortion, which again accounts for over 60% of abortions in the US, over 99% in the UK. So if we can get a victory here, if we can see some changes here, this potentially could go to other nations. And we could see again a blow, a death blow, so to speak, to abortion and to chemical abortion as a whole. So with that, though, Abigail's going to be speaking today on IVF. So Jonathan kind of primed the pump, so to speak, on that issue, and Abigail is now going to give us some more information as it relates to in vitro fertilization. Abigail.
Yeah, thank you, Summer. Thank you for having me. Jonathan did a great job covering a lot of the basics and the philosophy and what's going on in Congress. I suppose if I were to add just a few specifics, I would say it's obviously something that is very challenging in our current climate to speak about because there are so many people. I'm sure everyone on this call probably knows someone or is, at least a sort of second relation that has gone through infertility issues and has sought IVF. And what's interesting to me on this topic is that we're seeing increased infertility. And if you want to look at this picture holistically, and we can see our health generally as a society, American health has gone downhill dramatically over the last several decades. And it's just infertility is not an exception to that. RFK, Secretary Kennedy, has promised to look into our infertility issues. And we think that that's the best thing to do first is to understand what are the root causes, what's causing all of this. Like Jonathan had, sort of talked about, there's actually quite a lot that we can do for one another, for couples that are struggling with infertility prior to IVF, that will allow them to conceive naturally and will address their underlying health issues. So it's not that we don't support people having families. Of course, we're all about babies. We want people to have families, but we want to support them to do that in the best way possible. One of the big things that is a struggle in the medical industry generally is that they often just go to, and just, I'm not saying this about any specific physician, but I do think it's a spirit that operates, and it's a spirit of mammon, of money, seeking that profit. IVF is profitable. It's very expensive. Natural reproductive medicine and addressing underlying health issues by eating properly, removing certain things from your diet, et cetera, et cetera, it's not as expensive. They don't profit as much. And I know this is a broad stroke, but that is something that I think we do need to be praying about, that people care more about people than profits, and that we get over that spirit there. I think the other thing that I would keep in mind is that IVF, if we do go that route, and we're not saying no necessarily, we're saying let people be fully informed and let there be regulations so that we're not creating multiple embryos, then letting them freeze indefinitely or destroying them, so that people know the increased risk of cancer and developmental malformations, et cetera, that come along with IVF. So just consider that when you put a sperm and an egg, an embryo, in a petri dish, so it's meant to be in a woman's womb, right? In a uterus. You're you're putting it in a petri dish that is outside of God's design. Now, what's happening in that petri dish? No matter how sterile your laboratory environment is, you're exposing it to oxygen and other atmospheric things that are not natural, that it's not meant to experience. We should not be surprised that we see higher rates of cancer, higher rates of leukemia, et cetera, in children that have been conceived through IVF. And parents should know this. They should know that there are natural options available. A lot of them don't. And so that's what we're saying. We're saying, let's look at this holistically. And there is a bill in Congress called the Restore Act, and forgive me, I don't remember if Jonathan mentioned that. That would be promoting a lot of these holistic medicines, natural reproductive technology, and getting to the root causes. So when we're talking about IVF, if you're having conversations with your friends and family, I would just encourage everyone, be really sensitive, because obviously it's a very, very sensitive topic. But bring this information out, like Jonathan said. Look at our website, look at our resources, look at the facts available, and look at the facts as it relates to the lack of regulation currently. It is literally the wild, wild west. We see multiple different sperm and egg being combined when it's the wrong sperm and egg. So the DNA of a child doesn't even belong to the who was presumed to be the biological father. There have been malpractice suits of IVF doctors or sperm donors that are using their own sperm and fathering 50, 60, 100 children. It's pretty atrocious what is happening in the current state of affairs. And so that would be I'll just close with that if we're going to go this route, those things need to be addressed first. And with that, I'm just looking at the time, so I don't know if anyone has questions or if we want to go into prayer, but I'll pause there.
Sure. Does anybody have any questions for Abigail? Thank you, Abigail. Excellent as always. This is definitely an emerging issue. I mean, it's been it's been, in the news for quite some time, but it's something we definitely need to keep praying over. So thank you for keeping tabs on the latest developments and for helping us to kind of know how to pray. You're right, it's a spiritual issue. So we need to address the spiritual aspect of it as well as some of the other issues that you mentioned.
Could
Go ahead.
we get some information on how to find the more natural remedies to infertility?
Yeah, absolutely. On our website, and we promote the Restore Act, and that talks a lot about some of those options about getting the word out there. And then Summer, I can follow up with you as well on that question.
Okay, thank you.